So let's be real here for a second. Romance anime can be just as bad as isekai anime when it comes to overly used tropes and being incredibly generic. Romance has its own set of tropes and events that have to happen and that define it. And there's a ton of overlap in every manga and anime in this genre. Look, this isn't to say that romance anime is bad, but I digress. Hey, before I go any further, could you please like and subscribe if you enjoy this video? I'd really appreciate it. And also feel free to comment on anything I say in the future here. Just like with isekai, some shows are better than others. Like, some are just absolute masterpieces, and others are complete trash. And that brings us to Tomo-Chan is a Girl, the manga written for dudes who subscribe to the doctrine of muscle girl supremacy. But outside of that, it isn't really all that spectacular. In fact, it actually lacks a lot of appeal that sets it apart from other great anime in the genre. The characters are largely mediocre, the story lacks any compelling tension, and the events-based romance pattern it follows leaves most of people involved as nothing more than plot devices. If Love is War is a full breakfast with a fat stack of pancakes and a nice plate of bacon, Tomo-Chan is a Girl is a bowl of grits. It will satisfy you, but it's not the most amazing thing out there. This story follows Tomo Aizawa, a rough-around-the-edges muscle girl mistaken for a dude by her crush, the generic rom-com male protagonist Junichiro. Okay, that's a lie. He's not actually all that generic. He'd have to be wearing glasses, have no social standing, and be otherwise unremarkable. Jun can actually kick some butt when he actually needs to. As the story goes, Tomo will try and do something quote-unquote girly to try and get Jun's attention. Jun will ignore her and pretend like he doesn't realize, even though it's totally flustered him. And then she'll go back to complaining that there's no progress in their relationship. That's it. That's pretty much every episode of this show. Now, mix in the standard romance arcs of the school cultural festival, the fireworks, the beach episode, and you basically have this anime in a nutshell. Now, does Tomo-Chan as a Girl suck? No, not definitively. My issue with it is that it's largely forgettable. Sometimes you can add some flair to some rather boring and overused formulas by making small little changes to it. Something like, the male character is a monk in training and must refrain from worldly desires, while two girls at his school compete for his attention, completely unaware that he can't date them according to the precepts of his beliefs. Or how about a romance between a blind girl and an invisible man, who work as detectives in a world occupied by mythical beings, monsters, and aliens? So, what creative ingenuity does Tomo-Chan show? Muscle mommy. Yeah, there's my point. I only just recently finished this show up, and my memory is already getting incredibly foggy as to anything that actually happened in the show. And I've been through this experience twice. I read the full manga and watched the anime. Look, I got a good laugh out of it at times, but I still have to say it's far from a masterpiece in anime. There's nothing that stands out super brilliantly about this series as some great, compelling, or very creative choice, and it's going to be largely memory hold as far as I can see. Tomo-Chan isn't chill, lighthearted fun. It isn't slow-broiled romantic tension. It isn't masterfully crafted humor in romantic tension. It isn't tragic or heartrending. It's just there. And on top of the story writing largely feeling like it's more or less forgettable, there are a lot of characters who don't get proper resolutions for their roles in the story. Aside from Carol, anyway. Carol, best girl. It feels like characters are largely just introduced as gags, or were solely there for plot mechanisms rather than actually having a proper role in the story. Some characters even feel like they were supposed to have a more significant role in the story, but were forgotten about by the author overall. In the end, the show only has enough power to focus on the main couple, and everything orbits around Tomo and her struggle to get Jun to notice her. It feels like there's almost no consequence for Jun for having ignored Tomo for all this time, even though he knew how she felt. And even after admitting to that big stin, there still feels like there's no recourse to it other than Tomo punching him once. And of course, when Jun finally admits that he has feelings for Tomo, she gets all uncomfortable and starts avoiding him.
What now?
Like, what the hell? And then she goes on this whole questioning arc that adds unnecessary drama and is all like, do I really want to date him? Like, bitch, we know you like him, and we know you're going to end up with him in the end. Just go ahead and kiss the bastard already so I can go watch something better.
Women.
But no, we haven't met our episode quota yet. So we gotta drag this out more and have the overprotective dad get in the way and make things more complicated. because June and Tomo getting together like normal people would just be way too easy. It wouldn't give us enough material to work with. Yeah, I know, culture differences. I'm a Midwest American, and this is something that was written for the Japanese. Things are different, and flirting and relationships are handled differently. I get it, but that still doesn't change the fact that this faux tension is really, really annoying. Honestly, if it weren't for Carol, I probably would have dropped this series. She's about the only thing I can call fun in this show. She's a total airhead with no common sense, and that makes her the best comedic relief in the whole damn show, just for the fact that her actions are beyond prediction. On top of that, her one episode romance arc was more compelling than anything I got from June and Tomo. There was more emotion and intrigue in that than there was in the main character's love story. That moment where your side character casually outshines your main characters. I will give the series this much credit though. Most of the characters have intriguing twists to who they are, and aren't exactly who they appear to be right off the bat. Tomo is boyish and active, but likes being treated as a girl. Carol's the airheaded blonde, but still manages to be the most book-smart and intelligent person there. June looks like a musclehead at first, but he's actually a gigantic nerd. Misuzu is a bitch on the outside, but actually really cares about her friends. And so on, so forth. It's an interesting bit of contrast to each character, but it's hardly enough to actually keep you interested in the show. It ends up being a footnote, and not something that gets brilliantly expounded on in a way that you actually find compelling. And the odd structure of the storytelling, where there are random breaks that leave out context and fail to explain why things work out the way they do, or even rush through things altogether, doesn't really help this anime get out of the forgettable zone. It all feels like it's lacking chemistry or any sense of coherent storytelling, and it's just a lot of events happening, and being the events-driven story that it is, it really starts to fall apart around the halfway point, because there are no interesting characters to start carrying the weight of my disinterest in the story. Honestly, this show feels too much like an amateur project. It isn't bad, and at least showed enough promise to get me to go through all the way to the end. But there are some major rough patches that just didn't get ironed out, especially with characters who get thrown in for plot's sake and don't really have any story of their own and no resolution. But this sort of thing happens to be a trend overall for the romance genre and isn't particularly exclusive to Tomo-Chan. The issue is that there's no other hook to keep you from noticing the fact that characters are just there for convenience. I found myself watching this thing as a chore about 7 episodes in. It was just the thing that I did to fill the time because I had nothing better to do. That said, I will say again that it's hardly the worst thing I've ever watched. If you go into every romance anime expecting something as great as Love is War, you're gonna get burned almost all the time. Unfortunately though, not being the worst thing I've ever watched does not save it from being completely forgettable. It spends a lot of its time retracing its own steps, repeating the same actions and covering the same topic over and over again without adding any new flair or anything creative to keep it from feeling like you've been there before. There was an article I saw before making this video that said Tomo-Chan blends shonen and shoujo for comedic gold. But I disagree. I feel like most of the humor is minor gags at best, and there's nothing that had me laughing like Konosuba or Love is War did. And of course, I can't freaking find the article anymore, so I'm questioning my sanity, and I'll have to talk to the lizard people above about adjusting the simulation for stuff like that. This show is so stereotypical, bland romance anime that I'll probably forget I ever even watched it come a year from now. To be fair though, it's not like Tomo-Chan was a great, brilliantly written manga to begin with, so I don't really know what I expected out of this show. The irony of all of this though, is that the most passionate thing about this is everyone's unified hatred for Lexi Nieto as the English voice of Tomo. I get it, Nieto sounds way too masculine.
Shut up, dumbass! Is this a threat? Yo! What's up?
But I also understand the choice. Tomo's whole character is about trying to be seen as a girl, in spite of her very masculine tendencies. So I can understand the choice from that angle. Still, that doesn't change the fact that she just doesn't sound right trying to voice this chick in a very masculine way. And it's kind of unfortunate for her because she's not the worst voice actor I've heard in dubbed anime. She's just not a great pick for this role. There weren't really any moments where I felt like she wasn't delivering her lines well. And a lot of her conversations with other characters felt really natural and flowed well. Still, the dub is pretty hated across the internet. And if you post anything about it, you will invariably get someone saying something like, "The dub of this show is a war crime," or something to that extent. If anything, I felt like Junichiro's voice actor, Rico Fajardas, excuse my Spanish pronunciation there, gave more clunky and unnatural dialogue than she did. Still, though, Fajardas sounds more appropriate to his role, and it doesn't seem to get near as much flack. There is one fact about this dub, though, that I think everyone seems to overlook, and it's the fact that Sally Akemi voices Carol in both the English and Japanese versions. And honestly, she does a pretty good job of it in both versions. Again, Carol, best girl. Still though, Tomo-Chan as a girl is like a 5 out of 10 anime. It's just there. It's not something I would laud as a great, creative project in the genre or something revolutionary to romance manga and anime. But it is not at all Rent-a-Girlfriend or A Couple of Cuckoos. I would genuinely recommend you don't waste your time watching this unless you've got nothing else better to do. There are a lot better picks in the romance department, and we all know it. But hey, I think that wraps up this video, so that's enough out of me. Like, subscribe, comment, I already hit you with all that spiel. Have a great day. Later.